Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shubh, and together with my partner and co host Patrick, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Hey Patrick, we're back again after a 2 week break. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I hear you're currently on roadshow in Asia. How's that going?
Pretty good. Having fun, or I guess I should say I can't. We can't complain. So, uh,
Very German.
very German, and I guess again teaser for the next episode, which will
Nice.
have obviously idioms. But no, it's tremendous fun. Very intense in Mumbai right now. Meeting some of our firms and other friends in the ecosystem. But hey, speaking of countdowns and teasers to the end of the year, seems like we have a very interesting episode lined up this time around, Patrick. What are we talking about?
So I always keep telling friends of mine that know what I'm doing, but perhaps are not part of the VC bubble. That the best way to lose money as a VC is to make predictions.
Ah,
And I say that because if you stack assumptions and assumptions on top of each other, and in the end you have a huge assumption stack, all it takes is like one of these cards to fall over, and your entire whatever prediction is wrong. And so the longer in the future you predict, etc., the worse you're going to be. So that's actually not the job of the VC. But what we're going to do today is not make predictions, but bold predictions. Not
mhm.
saying they will come true, but more like scenario creation, thought provocation for the listeners out there. And we have five bold predictions that you and I are going to chat about only for the 2024 time
Yes.
horizon. So the next 12 months. And so everybody should take them with a pinch of salt. They're bold predictions. And we're not attaching a probability to them.
Yes. Nice. I think that'll be fun. It's that time of the year where I think we go into predictions mode. I hope this video ages well. So I guess best of luck to the two of us. By this time next year, I hope we don't look like fools. Although, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be the first time if we do.
Not more than usual.
Not more than usual. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I
All
mean,
right.
I I can kick us off. So my first bold prediction for the next 12 months, give or take, is that the data infrastructure for the AEC architecture, engineering, construction industry
Mm-hmm.
will see more funding and more customer adoption and faster
Mm-hmm.
than the AI running on top of it will actually see. And that's a bold prediction because a lot of people, oh, AI this, AI that, 2023
Yeah.
was the year of AI. Um, but I actually think it will suffer, especially in the AEC industry, from the data pipes, from the data lakes underneath
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And also you can't run AI, even if you're like a almost perfectly organized customer,
Mm-hmm.
contractor, an AE design firm, and perfectly organized in your mind would perhaps mean, hey, I'm having all these fragmented different systems, ERPs this, design tools that, project management tools here, my CRM there, and all these systems, I have all of them integrated, which, by the way, no one is having that. But
Yeah.
even if you have that, you can still not properly deploy AI, especially company-wide on it, because you still need
Mm-hmm.
to structure the data so that the vector models of an LLM can actually make mathematical sense of them. So you need to
Yeah.
snippet the data in a way that makes sense. So that's my bold prediction for 24 with regard to that, is that infrastructure companies for 3D information, as well as for flat information, for AE and C firms, will actually see more funding and grow faster than the AI companies running on top of it.
And so, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, what are these firms? What do they represent? The ones who offer a common data environment, data infrastructure.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
you just said the one. I think one of the important trigger words is like so in construction especially, and it exists to a degree, but a slightly different way also in AE. For construction companies, it has always been the norm that you create some kind of common data environment for the projects that you are running. Not necessarily a common data environment for the entire company, but for the projects. And that has legal
Mm-hmm.
reasons. You want to have a proper versioning on all the decisions that have been taken, on the
Yes.
history of the designs and how they have changed over the course of the project execution. Um, and then handing that over also to the operator in the end, or at least a subset of your CDE to the operator. So that has always been there, but every project has been different, and these CDEs are typically extremely clunky tools. They are not data
Yeah.
infrastructures. They are more like data rooms in a way you would think of them in a deal context or an M&A context,
Yes.
just to basically satisfy legal requirements. And so in an AE context, so in the design phase, there are some companies that have CDEs for the entire organization, so not necessarily only project specific, but for the entire organization, in the hope that they could at some point actually become able to make sense of all the data across projects, how they are designing as a firm, how they are practicing their craft, etc. So CDEs are extremely common, but slightly
Mm-hmm.
different between construction and AE. And yet CDEs today are extremely old softwares that mainly fulfill the enterprise readiness tasks of it, meaning security, archiving, having some kind of workflow versioning, who signed off on what when, but
Yeah.
it really isn't structured in a way to actually run, you know, data analytics or even more AI on top of that. And so these data infrastructure companies that we get excited about actually build the pipes, they build the data lakes, they have a proprietary database formats. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then they are able to actually end to end in a CI/CD fashion automate certain workflows across the handling of data. And that can be in a 3D context, for example, running clash detections or
Yes.
CO2 or takeoffs on the 3D models across every project, across every organization. It allows
Mm-hmm.
you to, if you're doing it right, these companies also allow to uh, make sense of all the 30, 50,000, 100,000 3D designs that your firm has perhaps done over the years, and then
Yeah.
analyze that and find the commonalities. And then, so that's 3D information or data, and in a flat information and flat data, there's so much more that you can do on top of that, with which has to do with all the textual and semantic conversations that perhaps happen in your firm about
Mm-hmm.
offers and takeoffs and
Yeah.
project executions, risks, etc. So that's what I'm getting excited about by firms that build this kind of pipes plus databases plus the ability to ETL and CI/CD, so that you can run end-to-end automation server side for your entire company.
And on the non 3D information side of things, this could, for instance, of course, also include um, formulae, computations,
Mm.
calculations, things of that sort as well, I suppose.
Oh, you seem to have something specific in mind there.
I mean, so in my mind, a dumbed down version of what you described could be, instead of silos of spreadsheets and silos of, I guess, uh, fossilized spreadsheets which are not connected to anything, not being updated by anyone, very hard to subject to an interdisciplinary review, very hard to know whether it's up to date information, be part of like an, I guess, a different choice of words. I was about to say embedded ecosystem, but I like common data environment better. So they're part
Mm.
of a common data environment where you can plug into knowledge within the firm for as well as, if you require, plug into knowledge outside as well, the way, for instance, a GitHub would enable it,
Right.
and have like a living ecosystem of information and documents.
And that's interesting that you mentioned these formulae, because there's just such a vast amount of engineering calculations that you have to do in our industry across the entire project lifecycle, really. Um, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of repetition that can actually be done. And yet there's a high degree of specialization, which
Hmm.
means that the ability to reuse what I personally have done in my history, or the ability to reuse what you have done in your history,
Yeah.
that's actually a collaboration at workspace. problem. So
Exactly.
we don't like to feature portfolio companies here because that's not what Practical Nerds is about. But if you're interested in such solutions, Google in Google Australia and you will find such a firm.
Exactly. That's right. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we've referenced two or three different firms in the sort of descriptions that we have laid out for common data environments and the infrastructure around it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the first bold prediction. I know everybody loves AI, but data infrastructure.
Yeah, I for one think that prediction is spot on. I think 2024 is going to be a very exciting year for this space,
Okay.
including the companies in our portfolio doing this.
Yeah.
Nice. So I guess that's a segue for the next prediction, and I'll lead in on this one. So we talked a bit about tools and AEC. In fact, I think multiple episodes of Practical Nerds have been about how the design tool stack in 3D and as well as in 2D in AEC really needs to change, is from a different generation, etc. So what I'm going out on a limb and making a prediction on is that there's going to be a mega acquisition in this space by one of the, I guess, one of the main larger firms in this space will jump in and make an acquisition which will probably resemble an acquisition of a firm which represents a direct threat to one of their core products.
In the 3D tool stack.
That's right. Yes.
Interesting.
So I think it's on the cards very much for next year.
Interesting. I'm not gonna push you on that because it's not the spirit of this, but you seem to have something, or perhaps a few very specific ones in mind, which give you this very high conviction on your bold prediction.
I do. I wish I could talk about more. I wish I could, but I think it's on the cards, probably for next year. And I will say, I think we all at Fundamental, this is a theme and a space we've been getting behind very meaningfully. And I think it's been a long time coming. And I think this will probably open the floodgates for a new generation of companies building the new stack, new design stack for AEC.
So given the information asymmetry you have here, I'm not going to take the other side of the bet. I'm not going to take the under on this one.
Yeah.
I'll just sit back and see what happens.
I think that would be smart. Yeah, that would be smart.
Hilarious. Oh, man. And so in that bold prediction, like, I really want to ask about like how big, but I think that's impossible to say. But let me perhaps twist it in a different way. What would be the acquisition rationale?
So the acquisition rationale, I think, could be across several facets. I think the most significant facet is any of the prospective acquirers. I think they've been stuck, as we've discussed in previous episodes, in a legacy where now it's become very difficult for them to truly create a platform, not a specific product which can be licensed, a platform which is ready for a collaborative age. So when you're then faced with a new platform which is ground up from day one, built to be collaborative, device agnostic, um, it actually represents an existential threat to a lot of these firms, right? Including to their flagship products, which is why I think the moment is coming.
Interesting. It kind of goes along with like a longer term thesis that we're following here. Is that so? A couple of things, right? So in this 3D tool stack for AEC, I mean, there are players, or there's one player that thinks they want to become the firmware of their clients, the way whatever Microsoft is the firmware of their clients. And I think that is such a lazy analogy. Like if that's what that incumbent or a number of incumbents think, I think they're terribly wrong in following that because they are not the firmware and they haven't started as the firmware. And so that's why the Microsoft analogy is lazy, because Microsoft started on the firmware level of organizations. It didn't have to grow there. And so if it had to grow there, and SAP, by the way, and Oracle, the same thing, they started on the firmware level of organizations. So growing into firmware will always lead to, let's say, organ rejection or at least diversification decisions. So that's like a core thing that I think we have this German saying. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up on the next episode here, but let me just tease you with this one. So the German saying translates into English: if you want to dry up the lake, don't ask the frogs. Okay. And so when I'm asking the frogs in AEC, hey, what do you think this incumbent is doing? Or like, what's their strategy? Like they cannot see the forest for the trees. They are like, oftentimes, yeah, I mean, oh my God, they're moving and they're becoming all this firmware, etc. But so if you play this out second, third order, at the same time, the customers are diversifying their stack. They know exactly what it is that makes them dependent if they follow down this route. And so that's the very reason why, I mean, sort of connecting your bold prediction and mine here, is that I actually think what's happening is that two ecosystems are emerging at the same time, is like incumbent clouds, and then there is independent clouds or mirrored data clouds, which will develop faster, which will thrive more, because customers need that independence. They like the flexibility to change out tool stacks, etc. And so if one incumbent, so now coming back to your bold prediction, if one incumbent now thinks they want to become the firmware and other incumbents are not even close to doing that, that might yield to the big acquisition that you are pointing out, if I get you right.
I think so. I think it'll be really fascinating because the truth, the honest truth, is that all of the incumbents need to level up, right? So one acquisition will not fix it, but in a bizarre way, that kind of creates an existential situation for all of them. If there is a party out there who's already belonging to the new generation, yeah, I'm very excited to see how that plays out.
Me too. Me too. I think there has never been as much change and pressure, actually, from within happening. And that's why I say I think if you ask the frogs know that the winds of change are there and that the times are changing, but I think they are not realizing just how much they are boiling themselves. Now I'm bringing a different metaphor into this one, but I think you get the point. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so on to the third bold prediction, moving away from the tool stack of 3D and data. So here's a bold prediction around workforce. So workforce shortage is very very much a real problem in the more mature markets, and has been for 10, 15 years. But I think this was the first year where incumbents in the construction ecosystem, to a lesser degree also in the design part of the value chain, especially in the construction ecosystem, have really, really noticed this. And you see this, before I come to my bold prediction, you see this in the last recession downturn. Workforces were actually laid off to an extremely large degree in order to make, again, room in the P&L. It doesn't happen in this cooling down for the last 18 months. Why not? Because these construction companies know that once they set this workforce free, the workforce will get a job anywhere else, and they will never get them back. And secondly, practically all companies in the construction ecosystem are professional services companies whose P&L is mainly driven by the amount of workforce you put to work. It's not a financial ecosystem where you put money to work. You put people to work, and that drives your top line. And so they are holding on to this workforce. So it demonstrates very much through this macro observation how valuable workforce is to this industry and how short it is. And yet my bold prediction is for 2024 that on-site robotics companies will actually scale faster and gain faster adoption than education tech models for workforce, especially the ones going after qualifying migrant labor and bringing them into work. And the reason why I think that is, I think a talented group of product founders, not robotics founders, product founders are actually founding robotics companies right now with a completely different mindset, not starting with automation mindset, the way you would do it if you worked at ABB before, but with a product mindset and following good product design principles to their robotics firms. And B, I think the Western democracies are right now scaling down on the amount of absorption of migrant labor.
Yes.
And so that's why I'm making that bold prediction, is that on-site robotics companies will scale faster and gain faster adoption than education techs for migrant labor.
Yeah. I mean, so this one is a fascinating topic, right? So we have kind of touched upon this to a certain degree in some of our previous episodes. I'm quite interested to see just how this plays out, and I guess we live in interesting times. It touches on so many different facets of geopolitics, domestic politics, in
Right.
different areas as well. Uh, I guess a related question on this, Patrick, on this prediction. So, what do you think? Are there certain niches in which these ed tech companies or education tech companies for migrant labor, do they have a place, or do you think they're kind of not going to be as relevant anymore?
Great question. It shows once again how unprepared we come into this conversation, because I now have to think on my feet. But doing that, so I think there are certain jobs that are extremely standardized and
Hmm.
yet extremely difficult to do
Hmm.
for robotics, right? And so robotics, oftentimes, you say that robots can do the hard things very
Hmm.
easily, and
Yes.
they can do the simple things very hardly, right?
Yeah.
And so truck driving
Hmm.
is such an example that falls into that. Very
Hmm.
standardized task, a very simple task for a human, but a very difficult task for a robot or an autonomous system. And so
Yeah.
every automotive expert that I've been speaking to over the last 5 years, up until recently, they still tell me that level 4, level 5 autonomous trucks are 20 years away. And I'm
Mm.
laughing every time that a VC tells me, no, that's wrong. I'm like, sorry, are you sitting in the R&D of these OEMs? I don't think you are, but that's exactly what the automotive experts are telling me, and it makes sense, because what about the telco infrastructure that you actually need, like 100% telco coverage to have
Hmm.
proper uh, cell phone connection for your autonomous system. Like start
Yes.
just with that, and
Yeah.
then it's just highly complex to build. And so for that, a migrant labor qualification model that helps motivated, qualified workforce across the borders into a mature economy to help solve for the shortage of truck driving. That would be a model where I would rather bet on the edtech than the robotics.
Mm. Fascinating. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm largely in agreement with you. I think there will be, and this is obviously not a prediction you're making. I think there will be more and more companies coming up on the edtech side of things for migrant labor in the next year or so, for various reasons. I think it is quite timely. I think the choice of the trade will be extremely crucial. You can't funnel in people for all the use cases.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, I was saying, right? So robots can do the hard things very easy, and they can
Yeah.
hardly do the easy things.
Yeah.
Um, and so, for example, we've backed a terrific founder team solving with on-site robotics for bricklaying and building
Mhm.
walls with bricks. And just for everyone out there, bricks are not only red bricks. Bricks are also concrete blocks. They also like building walls with stones, which is the predominant method of building in Europe, as well as some parts of the US, actually. Um, and so that's actually something for a human relatively hard to do, because it goes on your knees, it goes on your back. So sitting there like 8 hours a day
Yeah.
and doing that repetitive task, very hard for humans, very easy for a robot, because it's highly
Hmm.
repetitive. And it doesn't need a lot of like contextual control and navigating in the environment. So whereas what humans find easy, truck driving and controlling or reacting to what's happening in your environment, very hard for the robot.
Yeah. I think the way you described the division of competence on what can be done between humans and robots. I think that's very well described and very well put.
So we're looking for robot firms, and over time we've gained this understanding of the framework. You know, we were early investors in Safe AI, then in this European firm that I've just mentioned, early investors in a company in the US called Reframe, early investors in Mighty Buildings, all of them robotic solutions for construction. And so over time we've gained this
Mhm.
framework, right? And the framework is we're looking for companies that automate, first of all, on-site. We're more bullish on on-site robotics than off-site. Doesn't mean we wouldn't back off-site robotics, but on-site robotics, for the reasons just mentioned, we're actually extremely actively scouting for that. Two, in
Mhm.
on-site robotics, we're looking for firms that start with trades that have a lower requirement for visual fidelity. So finishing drywalls, that's a really, really hard task to do, just because the quality requirement for the visual fidelity is so insanely high.
Yeah.
Whereas if you build a brick wall and the mortar squirts out on the inside of the brick wall where it's unseen, already today that's acceptable as a quality standard the way human bricklayers are doing it. So they
Mm.
are a much lower requirement for visual fidelity. So that's the second part of the framework. Is we like to
I see.
start with trades where that requirement for visual fidelity is comparatively lower. And then the
Mm.
third one is reduce the degrees of freedom that your robot has to move. So if you need a robot that needs to operate on 6 axes to make it work, it's incredibly difficult. Not just to build the robot, to maintain it, but just also to get the software right for everything that you're doing. Whereas if you can actually automate a task through the reduction of degrees of freedom, meaning it only, for example, moves on one axis in the
Mhm.
simplest case, that's a brilliant way to start, and then extrapolate from there and add other traits from there. So that's like a few components of the framework, how we're looking at on-site robotics.
Very cool. Nice.
Shub, I got one more prediction, and I think you got one more prediction. Who of us goes
Yeah.
next?
Why don't you go? I think why don't you keep going? It could be an
I see what
interesting
you're
prediction.
doing.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to close us on a big bang. All right, all right. Then let me go with bold prediction number 4. So bold prediction number 4 is um, I actually think that the energetic renovation models
Hmm.
in Europe, and to a degree it will happen in the US as well, but not to the same degree. In
Hmm.
Europe, they will accelerate further and actually explode further in 2024 because solar subsidies will get reduced, starting in
Okay.
Germany, but spreading across Europe, and
Hmm.
the energy prices will keep on rising. Gas
Hmm.
prices will keep on rising, oil prices for heating will keep on rising, the grid cost will keep on rising, while the subsidies for solar and for grid will actually go down for consumers and for B2B business owners. And that
Hmm.
will give further rise to models that actually help with the decarbonization of the building stock in terms of assessing the buildings, designing the renovation measures, and providing financing for it. In a way, though, I don't believe in financing models that are standalone because I think they're highly undifferentiated, in a way where the financing is directly tied to the assessment of what needs to be done. So that's the bold prediction here, is that actually these models will see a further inflection. You think they already have inflected, and they have, but I think they will see a further inflection in 24.
Now there's a few things to break down over there, right? So someone listening to this is probably wondering, hey, hold on a second. So you're saying, as the support for solar goes down, energetic renovation will accelerate. So why would it play out in that fashion?
So we have the first spark of that happening this week, and I
Mhm.
think it will spread across Europe. Is that the German government, one of the biggest, so the biggest economy in Europe, the third or fourth biggest economy on the planet. Um,
Yeah.
I think fourth, probably behind Japan, perhaps. Um,
Yeah.
has actually decided this week in their renewed government budget proposal for 2024, that solar subsidies will get reduced.
Okay.
And at the same time, they decided to keep in place all the subsidies and programs to renovate the existing building stock. And that's a double
Nice.
dipping approach of this government to accelerate the decarbonation of building stock. Double dip because they keep the subsidies and the support programs for the actual direct, renovation, energy assessment, etc., for the building stock in place, while at the same time they're accepting with their coalition partners from this government to reduce the subsidies and increase the taxes directly on the energy prices, coming from the
Yep.
grid subsidies, coming from higher CO2 prices for gas, for power, etc. So you're now double dipping. You're supporting to renovate your building energetically, and you're making energy prices even more prohibitively priced. So that's starting in Germany, and it will actually move like that all over Europe. In my opinion, it will play out like that, and so that way, actually, the building stock will get, even on a more accelerated time frame, get renovated.
Any thoughts on why the budgeting has been done the way that it has? Because someone may look at this and say, hey, solar, it's also sustainable, it's also green. Why not support
Yeah,
it?
they look. I mean, they had to find compromise somewhere. There's only that much that they could finance, and so I think this was the best compromise for the Greens and the Liberals in the German government, where they said, okay, we can actually save some money here and yet achieve the objectives of an accelerated building stock renovation. So that's why they probably decided. I'm not privy to the conversations, but as an outsider, to me, it looks quite obvious.
I see. I see. And do you think there's also going to be some guidelines on, when for the subsidies and for the decarbonization of homes in Germany and then in Europe, um, are certain sources even more green than other green sources, if you catch my drift?
You mean primary energy sources for energy generation?
That's right.
Um, I mean, don't get me started on like life cycle assessments of solar, the modules, the crystals that go into it, etc. But so perhaps that's not what you're asking. Um, I mean, Germany has days where 50% of their energy generation is actually renewable. So, and then the other 50%, everybody gives Germany shit about because that's coal and gas, because they made the brilliant decision to move out of nuclear
Yeah.
for just 50-year-old dogmatic reasons of the Green Party, but has nothing to do with the actual reality of what nuclear actually contributes to both economic as well as CO2 savings. So that's stupid. So 50% renewable on great days and 50% fossils. So I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but yeah, that's what the energy mix currently looks like.
Hmm. Nice. And I guess to tag on to your prediction, do you think the energetic renovation will accelerate further? To what extent do you think it is tied to the subsidies? And do you think the subsidies may, in fact, subsidies for energetic renovation may actually increase even further? Perhaps
So
not in
not
2020, but a slightly longer term prediction.
Yeah, exactly. Not in 24, but probably after, because they are, I think, starting with Germany, all over Europe, there's actually a new economy being
Okay.
built on top of this. And so, like every good subsidy, and I think that's not properly appreciated by the global media, actually. Europe is building a very strong backbone and almost like competence cluster globally about energetic renovation of buildings. And so everything that we're seeing right now, and probably it's going to be like a 10-year time frame, kickstarted with subsidies, is like that creation of that hub. And just a quick anecdote. So I speak regularly with an investor team that I respect very much. They're a US based investor, extremely tier one, manage billions and billions, but just fantastic backgrounds. And so I asked them, about a specific company that we co-invested in the European, building energy transition and renovation. And I asked them, why did you invest in this company and not in another one with us? And it was very interesting to hear their thesis. Again, US investor, globally active, super top tier. And they said, we follow theses where we ask ourselves, which business branches does Europe have the right to win and the right to create pioneering decacorns in. And they said a few business branches, I'm not going to name them, that's proprietary to them, but they said one of them is actually energetic renovation. And so because we have that thesis, this is the best company to back in that space. Best model, best team, best traction, best unit economics, yada, yada, yada. Portfolio company of ours, and they did a round after us. And so, that's exactly what I'm thinking as well. And I think it's going to accelerate further because energy prices just got more expensive.
Fascinating. How interesting is that? I mean, I think this prediction will play out, and on a larger theme, maybe a topic for another episode of Practical Nerds. I'm sure you've been asked this question. I have as well, about, hey, what's with the divide in the VC ecosystem and the tech ecosystem between Europe and the US? Why is there so much of a divide? Will we ever see some sort of parity kicking in between the two ecosystems? I think that could be a fascinating episode. We'll save it for another day, perhaps.
I have a feeling that will be yet another very opinionated episode.
I think so too.
But we need to have Adam around for that one from our US team.
Yeah. I think we could make it a triple fight kind of an episode.
Okay.
Triple threat, I think is the term. Triple threat.
Okay.
I mean, look, I can jump in now with my next prediction and the final prediction for this episode. I mean, we've been talking a fair bit about Europe and Europe's right to win. I mean, what I'm predicting, so what we've been observing firstly, just to put out some background, I mean, what's been playing out for the last, I would say, 25, 30 years, give or take, is there's actually quite a large set of firms which are global, appear very global, in fact, often appear American, but most of the employees will be based in the US. In many ways, it could be described as an Indian firm if looked at from a different point of view. Originally, it started off with IT outsourcing firms, the likes of Infosys and the like. Then it went with analytics firms, which, for those of you who haven't followed how AI has evolved, a lot of what is called as AI was about 20 years ago called analytics, then big data and so on. So a lot of the analytics firms also are what we today call cross-border, which are American firms, but with a large set of teams, maybe even the founders based out of India, etc. Then we've had
an example like that. Fractal would be an example.
There'd be Fractal. There'd be another firm called Mu Sigma, for example. I think there's one or two others that I'm missing, which operate in that fashion at significant scale, hundreds of millions of dollars of annual revenue. More recently, in the last, I would say, 5-10 years, we've seen quite a few SaaS companies being built out that way, including firms that have since listed either in the New York Stock Exchange or in NASDAQ, which, again, for many different purposes, can be described as Indian firms, but which also have the identity of being an American firm. What we are seeing now, interestingly enough, and some companies we have in our portfolio, as well as those we are talking to in the last year or two, with this description, where, again, depending on what suits the market context, these are either American firms or Indian firms simultaneously. So this could be either product-centric firms, so in other words, also marking an evolution from being SaaS only, product-first companies, or AI companies, where, again, a lot of the talent is from India, but the markets being served are in the US or being trained on data from the US market. But interestingly enough, we are also seeing hardcore manufacturing tech, supply chain solutions operating across the US India corridor, including supply of materials, for example, which and I suspect it'll extend to other facets of the supply chain problem as well. I think there'll be more over the next year. We'll probably see a dramatic increase in the number of, I guess, US Indian companies, for lack of a better way to describe them, increasing in construction tech specifically. For several reasons, but I think the time has come where this corridor will dramatically increase in size. And it's very interesting because, as we have seen within our portfolio as well as outside, it's a great opportunity to activate both the VC and founder ecosystems of these two markets simultaneously, for funding as well as for growth, for building up who your support base is, etc.
So the blueprint exists, but what triggers it next year for you in your mind?
So again, this is a very subjective prediction. I think it's been building up for a fair while. I think, as we have pointed out in previous episodes, there are more and more successful cohorts of US Indian companies, US Indian founders, many of whom have turned angels. Bear in mind, many of whom have since turned VCs, operating again in the US Indian, American Indian
I see.
corridor, and who are fostering, making it easier for, uh, for instance, Indian founders to think America from day one, and not eventually level up, etc., and then think of becoming American firms or going to the US 5 years down the line, etc.
I see.
And I think it may also be, and this is a random thesis. I don't know if it plays out in an interesting way in all this discussion that probably was happening more intensely in 22, not so much in 2023. There was a lot of discussion on payroll cost, how heavy it is on a lot of these big tech firms. And we forget it now, but this time last year, thousands of high quality workforce was being laid off from big tech firms.
Right.
And I think, and this is a thesis, it has led to a surplus of high quality founders or people or uh, senior leadership members available for new companies. I mean, look, the reality is a significant chunk of professionals employed by those firms in the US happen to be of Indian origin. And I think a lot of them are actually forming like the next generation of either the founders or the early employees of these companies, many of whom are now saying, hey, what's the next big opportunity out there? And they're saying, hey, maybe it's construction, maybe it's AI, maybe it's supply chain, and it's intersecting in a very interesting way.
Super interesting. And I think, these people are listening to Practical Nerds, and they probably heard you in one of our earlier episodes provide the numbers that India is actually the largest construction tech market and ecosystem outside of the US, rivaling the US in terms of numbers, but also in terms of unicorns in construction tech. So if you look for a corridor, these two markets make the most sense. Is you can learn from one and apply it in the other. And then I think the other thing that you taught me very early on when we teamed up many years ago was that in India it's very difficult to sell software as a service, right?
Yes.
In the US that's the norm, but you can build software as a service in India extremely well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just to also put some numbers from your own piece on AEC-VC, Patrick. So, of the 17 unicorns we have currently in construction tech, uh, 12, so that is 7 from the US and 5 from India, uh, are covered by these two markets. So, in
Right.
effect, if you find a way to connect these two ecosystems in a corridor, whether you're an investor, whether you're a founder, whether you're someone wanting to somehow grab a piece of the action, it makes a whole lot of sense. You're capturing over two-thirds of the action right now. So I'm extremely bullish about more and more of these spillover, crossover kind of opportunities.
I'm loving it. And it gives so much resilience to everyone involved, right? It gives resilience and optionality to the founders and their companies, as well as to the shareholders and partners on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm hoping for, and this is not really a prediction for next year, but more longer term, I hope and leave.
Okay.
I would not describe this as a prediction, more of like something on the wish list, right? Something I would
Okay.
like to see happening is I'm hoping that this will also perhaps pave the way for. I mean, in an earlier episode, we have spoken about how in construction tech or in VC in general, we have a very US centric view of the world, or that
Right.
is the narrative. I'm hoping that as more and more activities happens in Europe, as more and more of these corridors get built out in India, we will perhaps see a bit more of a shift and a more multilateral shift in how VC is conceptualized and what sort of understanding of different models.
I see. I think that's direly needed because, I mean, I cannot tell you how little, I'm not going to use the swear word, clue generalist investors have in general of B2B, and then
Yeah,
in AEC, it's just, I mean, and I mean, it's not blaming them because if you're spending like, 250 days a year on looking at companies, and out of those 250 days, you get to look 5 days at construction and AE, and the
yeah,
other 245, you're looking at, everything under the sun from agriculture to pharma, medtech, mobility,
yeah,
etc. How could you know the details? It's just not possible. But the result is exactly that: is that they have no effing clue.
yeah. That is unfortunately the reality right
Yeah,
now. Yeah,
until it becomes obvious. So like when you dropped me the Slack today, and I completely agree. Until it's obvious, just the numbers jump at you, and you're like, okay,
yeah,
obviously this is a great business, and I don't need to diligence or have a thesis anymore. I can just follow the numbers. So
yeah,
until that point.
yeah,
Man, these are fascinating, bold predictions. Again, reminding everyone we're not attaching probabilities to this. Is meant as thought provocation as well. Some of them we actually do believe strongly in. Some of them maybe less so. We'll leave it up to your imagination, which ones are which. But I think all of them have merit. And so it's going to be,
yeah.
in my opinion, a very fascinating 24.
Absolutely. Also, how excited are you, Patrick, about our episode next week?
Very. I do. I got my. We're usually not preparing, but for this one, like you said last time, I'm gonna come prepared, and I got my 250 German idioms
Oh
ready.
gosh.
We'll not go through 250. We'll pick a few, and then we'll put them into the VC context or the
Yeah.
construction tech context, I should say. Um, how you can apply that idiom in your day to day in construction tech.
Yes. I will also have to come prepared. I will come prepared with some Bengali and Hindi idioms for the world of construction tech.
Tease me with one. Give me one.
Oh man, I have to think on my feet a little bit.
Oh, so
Um,
okay.
okay, let me try something in Hindi. Um, maybe it's a very unfortunate, it bears an unfortunate resemblance to the state of affairs right now with
Oh.
a few companies. Um, so it's an expression from Hindi. Um, the expression is घी निकालने के लिए उंगली टेढ़ी करनी पड़ती है, which means to get the ghee out of the bottle, you need to turn your finger, or right, you can't extract ghee with a straight finger, right? So that's what the idiom says. So you can't really get ghee out with a straight finger. You have to turn your finger. I guess it's a reflection of what certain founders think, right? Just to tease back to the previous
Oh
episode we did.
man.
I think some founders take it a bit too strongly, that feedback.
Oh shoot. Now I am so excited about the episode next week. This is gonna be hilarious. I mean, we should make a 2 hours episode. Come on, man. Like
Okay.
that's the holiday special.
Yeah, I'm up for it. I'm totally up
Awesome.
for it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I already gave you one today, which is, if you want to dry up the lakes, don't ask the frogs.
Yeah.
I'll for the listeners, Schub's most favorite German saying,
Oh,
and I'll leave.
let me say it. Is it Der Teufel ist ein Eichhörnchen?
Yeah, excellent, excellent.
Nice.
What does it mean?
The devil is a squirrel. I mean, for me, it's just the most epic line, man. It's the most epic line. I
Yeah,
mean, but if you're having a tough day, never all you can do is stop and remind yourself that the devil is a squirrel.
there you go, there you go. And the best thing about that is we'll end the episode on this one and leave it to everyone's imagination what the f that actually means.
Yes.
But we didn't make this up. This is an actual idiom from my home country.
It is. Absolutely.
All right, so we'll bring the juice next week with all the different idioms, and then we'll put them into the construction tech and VC context.
Looking forward to it.
Likewise. Shub, this was great. Anything in your calendar for next week you're looking forward to?
So few good meetings, but mostly looking forward to actually wrap up a few loose ends, both on the deal work side as well as I guess just thinking about solid start to 2024.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to recording our episode next week. That's my answer.
I think that's you got the correct answer on this one.
All right, man. I'll see you soon. Have a great weekend, Shub.
Thank you. You too. Cheers.
Cheers.